Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. President Donald Trump presents an artificial intelligence action plan focusing on deregulation to encourage growth of the industry and making sure AI is not biased. We'll talk about the plan with Wired senior writer Kate Knibbs. President Trump announces a trade deal with Japan that includes a relatively low tariff rate for Japanese imports combined with a large Japanese-funded investment fund in the U.S. to be directed by President Trump. FEMA's acting administrator defends the agency's response to the deadly Texas floods in testimony before a U.S. House Subcommittee. While a special legislative session in Texas will be considering aid to flood victims, it will also be taking up redrawing the state's congressional district lines, and that's getting attention from Democrats in Washington, D.C. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard briefs reporters at the White House about new documents she and the president say show former President Barack Obama led an effort to tie, falsely, Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign to Russia. House Speaker Mike Johnson gets more questions about the decision to not bring any bills to the floor this week that could be used for votes on releasing the FBI files on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And the United Nations Security Council holds a meeting on the war in Gaza as aid groups warn of mass starvation due to restrictions by Israel. Associated Press writes an artificial intelligence agenda that started coalescing on the podcast of Silicon Valley billionaires is now being forged into U.S. policy, as President Donald Trump leans on the ideas of the tech figures who backed his election campaign. Trump on Wednesday is planning to reveal an AI action plan he ordered after returning to the White House in January. He gave his tech advisors 6 months to come up with a new AI policy after revoking President Joe Biden's signature AI guardrails on his first day in office. The unveiling is co-hosted by the bipartisan Hill and Valley Forum and the All In podcast, a business and technology show hosted by 4 tech investors and entrepreneurs who include Trump's AI czar, David Sacks. That was from Associated Press. President Trump did speak at this AI summit as the White House posted on its website the new action plan.
As we gather this afternoon, we're still in the earliest days of one of the most important technological revolutions in the history of the world. Around the globe, everyone is talking about artificial intelligence. I find that too. Artificial, I can't stand it. I don't even like the name. You know, I don't like anything that's artificial. So could we straighten that out, please? We should change the name. I actually mean that. I don't like the name artificial anything because it's not artificial. It's genius. It's pure genius. And its potential to transform every type of human endeavor and domain of human knowledge, from medicine to manufacturing to warfare and national defense. Whether we like it or not, we're suddenly engaged in a fast-paced competition to build and define this groundbreaking technology that will determine so much about the future of civilization itself because of the genius and creativity of Silicon Valley. And it is incredible genius. Without question, the most brilliant place anywhere on earth. America is the country that started the AI race. And as President of the United States, I'm here today to declare that America is going to win it. We're going to work hard. We're going to win it. Because we will not allow any foreign nation to beat us. Our children will not live on a planet controlled by the algorithms of the adversaries advancing values and interests contrary to our own. We don't want to have contrary interests. We want to get along, and we'll get along with other countries. We're having a great relationship, as I told you, with those countries that we mentioned, with Japan and Indonesia and so many others. The European Union, we're getting along. We're getting along very well with China. A lot of respect for President Xi. We have a great relationship, and we'll see how it all works out. But we're getting along with countries it's really been pretty amazing, I will say that, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. So from this day forward, it'll be a policy of the United States to do whatever it takes to lead the world in artificial intelligence. Such an important thing happening. This is really something that nobody expected. It just popped out of the air, and here we are. But we will defend our nation, our values, our future, and our freedom, and it will be really great. But what we really need to be successful is a very simple phrase called common sense. And that begins with a common sense application of artificial and intellectual property rules. It's so important. You can't be expected to have a successful AI program when every single article, book, or anything else that you've read or studied, you're supposed to pay for. Gee, I read a book, I'm supposed to pay somebody. And, we appreciate that, but you just can't do it because it's not doable. And if you're going to try and do that, you're not going to have a successful program. I think most of the people in the room know what I mean. When a person reads a book or an article, you've gained great knowledge. That does not mean that you're violating copyright laws or have to make deals with every content provider.
President Donald Trump at the AI Summit held at the Mellon Auditorium in Washington, D.C. He also talked about the 3 executive orders that he is signing today. 1, to fast-track AI infrastructure permits. 2nd, promoting AI exports. And the 3rd, making sure that when the government contracts for AI, it does not have what he calls woke ideology.
One of Biden's worst executive orders established toxic diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology as a guiding principle of American AI development. So you immediately knew that was the end of your development. But the American people do not want woke Marxist lunacy in the AI models, and neither do other countries. They don't want it. They don't want anything to do with it. That's why on day 1, I very proudly terminated Joe Biden's order on woke AI effective immediately. You don't have any of those crazy rules. Crazy rules.
A headline at Wired.com, Trump's AI action plan is a crusade against bias and regulation. Article written by Wired senior writer Kate Knibbs, who joins us now by phone. Thank you for being with us. What is in the action plan from the Trump White House?
So there is quite a lot in this action plan. There's over 90 recommendations for federal agencies. And the headlines are, there's a lot in here that suggests that the Trump administration would like to basically deregulate AI. Which is a very different approach than the Biden administration was taking. There's also some commentary about removing ideological bias from artificial intelligence tools. People are colloquially calling it the anti-woke AI provisions. This is a very bold roadmap that is heavy on letting big tech have a much freer reign than they've had in the past. It clearly represents the thinking, in my opinion, of David Sachs, who's the White House's AI czar. And it will be interesting to see how it's implemented.
The president scrapped former President Joe Biden's AI guardrails first day in office. And now it's 6 months later. What happened in that time? Who contributed to this new plan?
So David Sachs, who is a major player in Silicon Valley, a venture capitalist, he's come into the White House and made his presence known, and his fingerprints are all over everything that Trump has been doing in regards to AI since he took office. And they're also all over this new action plan, which does explicitly roll back some of the Biden administration era AI guidelines and rules. For example, it recommends that the Federal Trade Commission review all of the investigations that it undertook under the Biden administration to ensure that they do not advance theories of liability that could unduly burden AI innovation. And that's just one example of how Trump is really trying to take down some of the guardrails that Biden had attempted to put up.
I guess this is premised on the outlook of what AI could be being different in the Trump administration versus the Biden administration. What are those 2 points of view about the future of AI?
Well, I think one thing that really stands out from this action plan is how focused it is on making sure that the United States is able to compete with China, whereas the Biden administration stance was much more concerned with safety and cybersecurity and putting guardrails up. So this is wanting to be first is Trump's point of view, and wanting to be safe is Biden's point of view, I would say. And I think it really demonstrates just how much China is on everyone's mind and how important it is for everyone in the administration that the U.S. come out ahead here.
We're talking with Kate Knibbs from Wired. What is the state of AI now in development in our everyday lives, and what's expected in the near future?
Well, it's interesting because right now it's not like there's this huge problem where AI companies are unable to get ahead in the United States. We've been witnessing this incredible boom in the technology and in the businesses surrounding the technology. Wired has been covering this really intense talent war going on where Meta is willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to hire single engineers to bring them aboard. Like, the AI industry in the United States is currently thriving and charging ahead. So one of the interesting things about this action plan is how it sort of presents the industry as being stymied, which I really don't think that it is. And to point out how unstymied it is, I think many of us have started seeing AI be much more present in our lives, for better or for worse, whether we're having ChatGPT take over some of our paperwork or using it to draft emails and it's helpful, or we're getting really frustrated because we're on the phone with customer service and it turns out to be a robot. We are very much, I think, at a point where AI is here. It's here to stay. It's continuing to advance and be interwoven into the fabric of our lives.
You mentioned in your article, again at Wired.com, that there was an AI moratorium that was a point of contention in the recently passed and signed into law budget reconciliation bill, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. What was that about, and does it point to any difference of opinion between members of Congress and the Trump administration?
Yeah, so the AI moratorium that was supposed to be in the Big Beautiful Bill was the handiwork of David Sachs and people in his sort of pro-big tech wing of the Republican Party. And it was essentially a plan to put a pause for initially 10 years, and they moved it down to 5, a pause on all state regulation of AI. The argument there was that if there was a patchwork of different state regulations, it could really impede federal development of AI. And, initially it had a lot of support. Trump wanted it to be in the Big Beautiful Bill. Ted Cruz charged ahead getting it into the bill. Then there was a lot of last-minute back and forth and lobbying going on. And Marsha Blackburn, Senator Marsha Blackburn, she was Cruz's co-author, ended up flipping at the last minute and rallying many senators to vote against, to vote to strip the provision out of the bill. It was a 99-1 vote. So, basically every senator got on board with taking this out because they started hearing from a lot of the people in the more anti-big tech, critical of big tech wing of the Republican Party who were worried about how much power that it gave to major AI players. So I think that all of the drama that went on with stripping the AI moratorium out is really a strong case study of how there is this tension in the GOP right now between the Silicon Valley people and then we're worried about Silicon Valley people.
Kate Knibbs, senior writer with Wired. You can find her article about President Trump's AI action plan at Wired.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Story at Axios. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, said Wednesday that AI has enormous disruptive potential that so far has mostly been unbeneficial for Americans. Hawley has been ringing the alarm on the need for lawmakers to better regulate AI companies at a time when Congress is struggling with how to regulate the industry. That was from Axios. He spoke at an Axios event called News Shapers, beginning by talking about a bill that he is co-sponsoring with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut.
We need to protect young creators. We need to protect ordinary Americans and their material. And we've got to give them the ability to do that by getting into court against these companies. So I'm sure the companies will hate it, but I think it'll be good for the American people, and that's the main thing.
Yeah. This bill caught my eye because what we've been hearing from President Trump, and we know he's making an announcement later today about the strategy towards AI, what we've heard from him, what we've heard from Republican leaders, the emphasis has really been on, adopting and competing in AI, and there's really a reluctance to regulate AI right now. Is that the right approach to you? What do you think of the way this is being handled?
Well, I think we've got to put the American worker and the American creator and the American individual at the center of our policy. We've got to ask a basic question. Do we want AI to work for people, or do we want people to work for AI? And I want it to be the first, that AI is in service to the American people. So look, if we can get AI to make workers more productive, fantastic. If we can get AI to help us with medical innovation, wonderful. If we can get AI to help creators rather than hurt them, that's superb. But I'm worried that's not the trend line that we're on. And if you look at how these companies are behaving, it's basically a smash and grab mentality, where they're going in and they're grabbing everything that they can get their hands on, all of the creative material, all of the name, image, and likeness material, all of the personal data, and they're not asking anybody, they're not compensating anybody, they're not even trying, they're just taking. There's something wrong with that. And I think if we continue down that road, we're going to have a major reckoning, and that's before we get to the potential mass displacement of jobs. I mean, we are looking at potentially, with this AI revolution that's being forecast, huge loss of jobs for working people, entry-level white-collar jobs. I think we better start thinking really hard about that. And again, I think we better find a way to put people at the center of our technology policy. If we don't do that, I'm worried about what that's going to mean for ordinary working Americans.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, at today's Axios News Shapers program. Story from Reuters: Japan's trade agreement with the U.S. could serve as the benchmark for many other deals currently being negotiated with Washington, and the global economy could just about support the 15% level agreed overnight, economists said. Tokyo's deal with the U.S. lowers tariffs on auto imports to 15% from levies totaling 27.5% previously. Duties that were due to come into effect on other Japanese goods from August 1st will also be cut to 15% from 25%. That was from Reuters. President Trump announced this deal between the U.S. and Japan last night and again spoke about it today at the start of the AI summit in Washington.
And I just want to start by stating that we've just concluded our big trade deal with Japan and numerous other countries in addition, as you know. But on the Japan deal, because it was literally just signed, it gives us a sort of signing bonus. I'll bring it into sports talk, a signing bonus. Like you have signing bonuses too, I understand. You're getting a lot of money, 100 million, that's not bad. But that's not as good as the signing bonus we got. We got a $550 billion signing bonus for the country. And we had the tariff at 25%. As you know, we had a tariff at 25%. And these are great people that we negotiated with, but we agreed to reduce it to 15 based on the fact that Japan has agreed for the first time ever to open up its country to trade, so that all of our American businesses and business geniuses, including many in this room, can go out and do business openly and freely in Japan, a very rich and prosperous and profitable and wonderful country, frankly. And we will pay a zero tariff as we do business in Japan. So we're paying zero, they're paying 15. We're getting $550 billion. And to be exact, it's 90% of that, but we control the whole lot of it. And it's really been great. And they're very happy, and their stock market went up, and our stock market went up, and that's supposed to be the way it is. Ours went way up, and theirs went up. And we've made numerous other deals like that. But the opening up of a country is very important to us. We have numerous countries that have opened their doors, just made some incredible transactions, but we're going to have a very, very simple tariff for some of the countries. We have so many countries you can't negotiate deals with everyone, so we'll have a straight, simple tariff of anywhere between 15 and 50%. A couple we have 15 because we haven't been getting along with those countries too well, so we just say, let's pay 50, and that's the way it is.
President Donald Trump at the start of the AI summit in Washington, D.C. The Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on Bloomberg television today saying that that investment fund that the president mentioned, $550 billion, was a trade-off for a lower tariff rate for Japan, which Japan wanted so they could still afford to export some cars to the U.S. The secretary explained how that fund would work.
The Japanese are going to give America the ability to choose the projects, decide the projects, and execute the projects. So let's say we want to build, generic pharmaceuticals, right? We don't make antibiotics in America. So the president says, let's go make antibiotics in America. The Japanese will finance the project. They will finance the project, and then we'll give it to an operator who'll run it, and the profits will be split 90% to the taxpayers of the United States of America and 10% to the Japanese. So they basically bought down their tariff rate by this commitment of we will back what you, the president, want, and you, America, want to build in America that are key to national security concerns. We'll back that, and therefore will be on your side.
The Prime Minister, Ishiba, says these are loan guarantees. Is it more than that?
Of course it's more than that. It's equity, loans, and loan guarantees. They have to deliver the project. So we say, let's build semiconductors. We want to build $100 billion worth of semiconductor fabs, is what you call them, because we want to make those chips in America. The Japanese will finance that whole project. They've got to put down equity, loans, whatever they want to do. They have to deliver the $100 billion.
Or Japanese companies?
Oh, no. Anybody does it. It's the Japanese are the financer. They're the banker. They're not the operator. It's not Japanese companies. So when people get confused, this isn't like a Japanese company like Toyota coming in and building a factory. No, that's Toyota. This is literally America saying we want to build generic pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, critical minerals here.
Does anything like this exist now? Like, what could we think of and model after
That's why you have someone like me who joins the government. I mean, this was my idea in January. So I started, because the Japanese are never going to really open their market the way Donald Trump wants them to open it. I mean, open it. You know, so what happens is they had to come up with another way to really make it work and the tariff model work.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick today on Bloomberg Television. Story from Fox Business on Wednesday. A White House official confirmed to Fox News that under the trade deal, Japan would buy 100 Boeing planes, boost rice purchases by 75%, buy $8 billion in agricultural and other products, and hike defense spending with U.S. firms to $17 billion annually, up from $14 billion. Again, that was from Fox News. On the Senate floor, the Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about this deal announced by the president.
Last night, President Trump announced another trade deal, this time with Japan. Like most of the deals announced over the past month, it was big on promises, short on detail, and crucially, provided zero relief for American families and small businesses. Whether it's this agreement with Japan, where tariffs are increasing to 15%, or earlier ones with Indonesia or Vietnam, where tariffs are increasing to 19 and 20%, the Trump tariff taxes are going up, not down. That means one thing: higher costs for the American family. Ask an American family if increasing their costs by only, quote unquote, 15% is okay. In the meantime, and by the way, the media, they say, well, there's a great deal because it wasn't as bad as Trump originally proposed, but is still very bad for the American people and raises costs 15%. American people aren't going to buy that this is a good deal at all. Good deal at all. In the meantime, the Trump administration is granting greater access to advanced semiconductor technology, surrendering to China, higher costs for families and small businesses. Trump's trade war has been and continues to be a huge failure.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor today. A story from Reuters: the deal with the world's fourth largest economy, which includes commitments for U.S.-bound investments and loans, is the most significant of a clutch of pacts U.S. President Donald Trump has concluded to date. It raises pressure on China and the European Union, which both face crucial August deadlines. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 507, NASDAQ up 127, S&P up 49. This is Washington Today. Story from The Guardian. David Richardson, the acting director of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, on Wednesday defended his agency's handling of recent deadly floods in Texas, claiming the response was a model for how disasters should be handled. The comment came as Richardson faced accusations that the response to the floods was botched, characterized by ignorance and carelessness. Again, that's from the Guardian article. The hearing was on Capitol Hill before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management. These questions coming from Congressman Greg Stanton, Democrat from Arizona.
How many times have you met with President Trump since you've assumed this role?
I have not met with President Trump.
How many times have you spoken with President Trump one-on-one in your current capacity?
I correspond with the president on a regular basis.
Where were you on July 4th and July 5th of this year?
On July 4th, I was on vacation.
When did you return from your vacation?
I returned the next day.
So on July 5th, you returned to Washington, D.C.?
I spent the entire vacation in my vehicle speaking on my phone to either the state of Texas or DHS, coordinating for the events in Texas.
Were you on the first plane back to Washington then from your vacation?
I was in my truck with my two boys and myself. I was in my truck. I remained in my truck the whole time.
When did you first learn of Secretary Noem's $100,000 sign-off policy, and did you warn her or anyone at DHS about the potential for delays in FEMA's ability to respond as a result of that policy?
The Secretary signs anything that comes across her desk nearly immediately without undue delay. And I never had a concern about the $100,000 memo, never concerned me. I've never seen it cause any undue delay.
The $100,000 sign-off policy did not delay your ability to proactively put forward resources, urban search and rescue resources in place as soon as you knew about how bad the flood was.
Under President Trump's leadership and Secretary Noem's leadership, their exceptional leadership, the support that was so critical to the people and the state of Texas on their worst day was on target, on time, and that is what they told me. Yeah. That's what the president said. That's what the secretary said. Texas got what they needed when they needed it.
So your lack of visibility in the hours and days and even week after this horrific flood that cost so many lives is shocking. Secretary Noem was very present. You were not. Did President Trump, Secretary Noem, or any official at the White House direct you to stand down during this crisis?
I was in constant communication with the state of Texas, DHS, and the White House, handling the disaster immediately when I found out. And I remained so for the entire time. Constant communication with the emergency manager in the state of Texas, NIM-KID, as well as Region 6, as well as communication with the White House and Secretary Noem. I was on full duty, full time.
Mr. Richardson, you were nowhere near Texas at the critical moments in the search and rescue, and you did not even show your face for more than a week after the flood. You are the administrator of this critical agency. You're the leader, but you did not lead as you are required to by federal law. But worse, you seem uninterested to learn what went wrong and how to respond better. Do the victims and survivors in Texas deserve an apology?
What happened in Texas was an absolute tragedy. It's hard to fathom. I went to Texas. I flew over. It was an absolute tragedy. My heart goes out to the people in Texas.
Yeah,
I know that there was...
That was intended as a yes or no question, and I'll appropriately take that as a no. Mr. Chairman, this wasn't just incompetence. It wasn't just indifference. It was both. And that deadly combination likely cost lives.
Congressman Greg Stanton, Democrat from Arizona, questioning the FEMA acting director, David Richardson, at today's House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee hearing on disaster response. Story from HuffPost, the Department of Homeland Security slammed FEMA's former urban search and rescue chief after reports said his recent resignation was due to the Trump administration's imposing policies that delayed disaster response, the deadly flood that devastated Texas earlier this month. Sources familiar with the resignation told the New York Times that Ken Pagurek, who stepped down on Monday, first expressed concerns over the administration's changes, causing disruption since the start of hurricane season. He was especially concerned with a new policy that required Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to personally sign off on contracts or grants for more than $100,000. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson defended the agency's response to the Texas floods in a statement to HuffPost on Wednesday and scoffed at the decision. The statement says it's laughable that a career public employee who claims to serve the American people would choose to resign over our refusal to hastily approve a six-figure deployment contract without basic financial oversight. We're being responsible with taxpayer dollars. That's our job. Attempting to spin a personal career decision into some big scandal is ridiculous. Reporting from HuffPost. In a related story, this from the Texas Tribune, as the Texas legislature's overtime special session kicked off Monday, Democratic lawmakers promised to make their Republican colleagues' efforts to redraw the state's congressional maps as painful and protracted a battle as possible. They threatened to drag out hearings, filibuster, and even flee the state to deny the quorum necessary to conduct legislative business. In a letter to Governor Greg Abbott sent Monday, a majority of House Democrats called on the governor to prioritize responding to the Central Texas floods, saying they refuse to engage in any other legislative work until after adequate flood relief and disaster mitigation legislation are passed and signed by the governor. That's reporting from the Texas Tribune. Texas redistricting was the subject of a news conference in Washington, D.C., held by House Democrats and the Congressional Voting Rights Caucus, co-chaired by Mark Vesey of Texas.
Across the country, Donald Trump is behaving like a dictator and issuing marching orders to his subservient governors around the country to try and rig the elections before a single vote is cast. And let me be clear, this is an authoritarian move. And when authoritarians know their policies are failing, when they gut health care, they jack up energy bills, the Trump tariff taxes, the big ugly bill. They know they have to cheat to win. And that is what's happening right now. Worst of all, they're using these catastrophic floods as a political ploy and cover to silence the voices of millions of Texans, mainly Hispanic, Black, and Asian Texans. And today, along with my fellow Texas Democrats, we have introduced an emergency flood relief bill to support the victims as we rebuild following this tragedy. Because what's happening in Texas, again, is only the beginning. Trump is not going to stop in Texas. This is a show that he is going to try to take on the road, and we know that he won't stop here. He said he'd leave Roe v. Wade alone. He lied about that. He said he knew nothing about Project 2025. He lied about that. He said he was not going to gut children's health care. Of course, we just saw him recently do that. The Voting Rights Act, continually trying to gut that. They can't win on policy, so now they're trying to redraw the maps. And don't believe them when they say this redistricting is about fairness. Don't trust them when they say race has nothing to do with this. If you give them an inch, they're going to take everything. And so Trump's vision of this country is one where you have to pass a loyalty test just to be able to vote.
Congressman Mark Vesey, Democrat from Texas, at a news conference on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol in Washington with other House Democrats. An ABC News article reads, the Republican-controlled state legislature in Texas drew the current map in 2021, which was set to remain in effect until 2031. President Donald Trump's political operation floated the prospect last month in efforts to shore up the GOP's fragile House majority to tepid responses from the state's congressional delegation. Yet just this week, Trump rubber-stamped the effort and wants his party to pick up 5 seats if Texas redraws its congressional maps. He suggested that there could be other states that follow suit. He did not specify which states. That was from ABC. Governor Greg Abbott, Republican of Texas, was interviewed about this congressional redistricting on KDFW-TV on Tuesday.
Why did you add redistricting to the special session call? So since the last time that we did redistricting, the law has changed. And under the law that changed in a lawsuit that was filed by Democrats, and the decision came out last year, it says that coalition districts are no longer required. And so we want to make sure that we have maps that don't impose coalition districts, while at the very same time ensuring that we will maximize the ability of Texans to be able to vote for the candidate of their choice. Republicans defended this map for years. Sure. And as they rightly should have, because the map that was drawn before this recent court decision that said coalition districts were not required. And the map, I believe, as drawn, could be upheld. That said, we are no longer compelled to have coalition districts. And as a result, we can draw maps not have coalition districts, and through that process maximizing the ability of Texans to be able to vote for their candidate of choice. And listen, one thing about this also, and that is this is a national-based issue. Don't think that Texas is the only state that's doing this. Texas is the first in line because our primaries are earlier. You know, our filing deadline is a few months away here in December. There are other states that are Democrat states across the country where their election process begins much later, who have been talking about doing this very same thing. So this is a national-based issue as well.
Governor Greg Abbott, Republican of Texas, interviewed on Tuesday. KGO-TV in California writes that California lawmakers are grappling with Governor Gavin Newsom's bold proposal to scrap the state's independent redistricting system in favor of a partisan power play. Newsom's threat is in direct response to Texas Governor Greg Abbott's mid-decade redistricting efforts. On the agenda in a special legislative session that commenced Monday, lawmakers in the Lone Star State are meeting in part to consider President Trump's request for the state to add up to 5 GOP-leaning congressional districts ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Newsom, frustrated by what he calls a rigged process in red states, says California should consider doing the same to boost Democrats' representation in Congress. That was from KGO-TV. More on voting when Washington Today continues in a moment. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard talks about accusations that Democrats, led by former President Barack Obama, ignored evidence that Russia did not try to tip the scales in Donald Trump's favor in the 2016 presidential election.
America marks 250 years, and C-SPAN is there to commemorate every moment, from the signing of the Declaration of Independence to the voices shaping our nation's future. We bring you unprecedented all-platform coverage, exploring the stories, sights, and spirit that make up America. Join us for remarkable coast-to-coast coverage celebrating our nation's journey like no other network can. America 250, over a year of historic moments, only on the C-SPAN networks.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard begins an article from The Hill. On Wednesday, released a previously classified House report, her second such disclosure after accusing the intelligence community of a treasonous conspiracy in its review of foreign influence in the 2016 election. The report, a 2020 product from the House Intelligence Committee, cast doubts on Russian President Vladimir Putin's interest in the 2016 election and his desire to aid President Trump in the contest. The release comes as President Trump has sought to use Gabbard's Friday disclosure to pin blame on former President Obama, accusing him of trying to rig the election. Numerous intelligence reviews have concluded that Russia aimed to influence the 2016 election and that Putin favored Trump. That was from the article from The Hill. Director Gabbard answered reporters' questions in the White House briefing room.
President, yesterday you've inferred that the former president helped lead a coup. Based on what you now see, do you believe President Obama is guilty of treason?
I'm leaving the criminal charges to the Department of Justice. I'm not an attorney, but as I've said previously, when you look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments that were created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and a treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration.
The Senate Intelligence Committee spent several years looking into this and unanimously agreed in a bipartisan fashion, Secretary of State Rubio was a member of that committee, that there was no political interference. There was a years-long Justice Department investigation into this as well that also concluded no political interference. So help us, from a 50,000-foot level, explain, what do you now have that refutes those two conclusions?
I will encourage you, in my role as the Director of National Intelligence, My job, again, as I said when I came into this role, was to make sure that we are telling the truth to the American people and that we are ensuring that the intelligence community is not being politicized. So I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you and the media to conduct honest journalism and the American people to see for yourself in the documents that we've released now, close to 200 pages, that point in multiple references, multiple examples, to include comments that have been made by senior intelligence professionals, who are some still working within these agencies today, that confirm the conclusions that we have drawn, that President Obama directed an intelligence community assessment to be created to further this contrived false narrative that ultimately led to a years-long coup to try to undermine President Trump's presidency.
And it's your belief that those two previous investigations missed that or covered it up?
I'm telling you to look at the evidence. Look at the evidence, and you will know the truth.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard in the White House briefing room. Standing beside her, the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who was asked what President Trump would like to happen to former President Obama, given the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity.
What is the accountability that you would like to see if this current president is the one who brought the case to the Supreme Court and Chief Justice Roberts made clear in his opinion that a sitting president's responsibilities in office cannot lead to prosecution, immunity? So what is it the President Trump wants regarding President Obama, given that fact? And the special counsel at the time, Durham, when that Supreme Court matter was not in effect, could have charged anyone and did not. So on those 2 points, how do you respond?
Look, the president has made it clear that he wanted these documents to be declassified. He wanted the American people to see the truth, and now he wants those who perpetuated these lies and this scandal to be held accountable. As for what accountability looks like, as the director said, it's in the Department of Justice's hands, and we trust them to move this ball forward.
Well, you would agree President Obama cannot be charged based on that immunity.
Again, I'll leave that to the Department of Justice.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in the White House briefing room. Wall Street Journal is reporting that when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a truckload of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein earlier this year, they discovered that Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times, according to senior administration officials. In May, Bondi and her deputy informed the president at a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files, the officials said. Many other high-profile figures were also named. Trump was told being mentioned in the records is not a sign of wrongdoing. That was from the Wall Street Journal article. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, met with reporters on this last day of House floor voting on legislation before the August recess. He said that reports that the House was leaving Washington early and scrapping work on other bills that were on the agenda to avoid procedural votes related to the Epstein case are not true.
Yesterday, some of you may have seen a false headline in the New York Times, and the headline was terribly misleading. It said House Republicans are, quote, adjourning until September to avoid a vote on releasing Epstein materials. I just want you to know, and everybody here knows, that's an outright lie. It's not true. And they were forced to modify their headline and update it today. The reason is, we all know that's the initial lie travels much faster than the truth, and so we're making sure that people know what is actually going on here. I think every single one of your publications have known that the published schedule of Congress was decided in December of 2024, and it's been published ever since. We are fulfilling the calendar. We're working. We'll be working tomorrow. There have been votes every day this week. We have 9 or 10 committees working through markups this week, many tomorrow. Congress is doing its work. No one is adjourning early. We have an August district work period that is very important to the function of Congress that has been recognized for all of memory of this institution, and that is what everyone will be doing. The Times was forced to change the headline because it was completely false. No one in Congress is blocking Epstein documents. No one in Congress is doing that. What we're doing here, Republicans are preventing Democrats from making a mockery of the Rules Committee process because we refuse to engage in their political charade. That is what is happening and nothing more.
House Speaker Mike Johnson holding a news conference in the Capitol building just off the House floor. Washington Post reports that Congressman Eli Crane, Republican of Arizona, reiterated his call for releasing files related to the Jeffrey Epstein case during a tele-town hall Tuesday night after a caller asked where he stands on the issue. Raised early in the 35-minute call, the question underscored the growing pressure Republicans are feeling on the matter. House Speaker Mike Johnson plans to start recess Wednesday, a day earlier than planned, effectively blocking legislation that would reach the House floor this week. That was from the Washington Post. Back to Speaker Johnson's news conference, he was asked about that pressure from Republican members of Congress to take more action.
Concern, I mean, obviously we've seen the conservatives shut down the House floor routinely. You saw that you had to pull the rule because of fear of Epstein votes.
No, we don't have any fear. No, hold on. No, Reese, no. There's no fear here. No, there's no fear. There's no fear. We're not going to allow the Democrats to use this as a political cudgel. Remember, they had 4 years. Hold on. The Biden administration held the Epstein files for 4 years. Not a single one of these Democrats or anyone in Congress made any peep about that at all. They could have brought a discharge petition at any point in the last 4 years. They chose not to. They waited until President Trump was elected. I think that's very suspect. And I will not allow the House to be drug into political gamesmanship. Not going to do it.
Promises that Republicans made to voters over Jeffrey Epstein. Why not more of a sense of urgency? Why not just hold a vote today?
There's no point in having a vote today because the administration is already doing everything within their power to release them. They've gone to the grand jury. They've requested the courts to unseal the documents so that they can be released. The president himself has said all credible evidence should be put out to the American people while protecting the innocent. That's where we stand as well. There's no point in passing a resolution to urge the administration to do something that they are already doing. And so that's why we're going to let that process play out. This is not out of fear in any way. What we're trying to do is maximize transparency and stand for the truth. We want, wait, let me say this, very important. We want every single person who was involved in any way in the Epstein evils to be brought to swift justice. We want the full weight of the law to fall upon their head. And I will do everything within my power to make sure that is possible. That process is underway right now, and we'll see how it plays out.
House Speaker Mike Johnson meeting with reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan posting on X, Pennsylvania Democratic Congresswoman Summer Lee's motion to subpoena the Justice Department for a full, unredacted release of the Jeffrey Epstein files was approved on an 8-2 vote by the House Oversight Subcommittee on Federal Law Enforcement. 3 Republicans joined all Democrats in voting yes. Jack of Georgia, Mace of South Carolina, and Perry of Pennsylvania. The chair Higgins of Louisiana and Biggs of Arizona voted no. That was the post from C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan. And from Politico, Senate Majority Leader John Thune said Wednesday that Speaker Mike Johnson has to figure out a way forward on the Jeffrey Epstein controversy that's derailed House business until the fall. Thune said during an interview from his Senate office, in some fashion, in some way, he's going to have to handle it and deal with it. And it sounds like, yeah, that'll be a September issue. Also from Reuters, a U.S. judge on Wednesday denied a U.S. Justice Department bid to unseal grand jury transcripts related to the late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in South Florida, the first ruling in a series of attempts by President Donald Trump's administration to release more information on the case. The Justice Department has pending requests to unseal transcripts in Manhattan federal court related to a later indictment brought against Epstein and his former associate Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge found the Justice Department's request in Florida did not fall into any of the exceptions to rules requiring grand jury material to be kept secret. That was from Reuters. Story from Spectrum News. One day after Speaker Johnson delayed a possible vote on releasing files related to the federal investigation into deceased financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, House Democrats said the move was connected to Republicans' passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act earlier this month. And that was from Spectrum News. Here's the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, making that connection at a news conference today.
Mr. Leader, what concern do you have that the conversation about Jeffrey Epstein, which has really dominated the Hill for the last 2 weeks, might overtake the messaging that you all are attempting to bring about the effects this bill would have on the American people? I mean, already we saw today, you were all talking about going out and talking to the American public, but at the same time, Congresswoman Clark made sure to start her remarks with conversation about Jeffrey Epstein. How do you balance that messaging?
Well, I'll yield to Whip Clark and Chair Aguilar, but the reality is that it's all connected from the standpoint of Donald Trump, his administration, and House Republicans have delivered nothing more than a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. They've passed massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. And in the context of this Jeffrey Epstein scandal and their refusal to share information to the American people, despite promising to do so, one must ponder the question, what are they hiding from the American people, and what billionaires, what well-connected donors, what elite people are they trying to protect? Why haven't Republicans released the Epstein files to the American people? It's reasonable to conclude that Republicans are continuing to protect the lifestyles of the rich and shameless, even if that includes pedophiles. That's a conclusion that if this continues, one may necessarily be compelled to reach. So it's all connected. Democrats are fighting to make life more affordable for the American people, to improve the quality of life for working families, middle-class folks, all those who aspire to be part of the middle class, hardworking American families, older Americans, our veterans, our families, the men and women of organized labor. This is what drives Democrats. But Republicans are focused on their billionaire donors. That was the centerpiece of the one big ugly bill, and it's what explains Republican refusal to release the Epstein files.
The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference today with the next two ranking House Democrats, the whip Catherine Clark of Massachusetts and the caucus chair Pete Aguilar of California. The story from Politico, Democrats are hoping to jam Republicans with Jeffrey Epstein-related amendments ahead of a Thursday appropriations sub-panel markup. According to two senior Democratic aides granted anonymity, the Epstein issue had already scuttled the House floor schedule for the remainder of the week, leading Speaker Mike Johnson to send the House home early for their 5-week summer recess. Democrats have attempted to force the issue in the Rules Committee and on the House floor, dividing Republicans who have faced a backlash from the MAGA base. Now, according to the aides, Democrats will do the same at the subcommittee markup at 10 a.m. Eastern Thursday. Aides granted anonymity because they were not authorized to divulge plans. That was from Politico. The Jeffrey Epstein case was mentioned today at the 3rd Annual International Summit Against Human Trafficking hosted by CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, held in Washington. Matthew Galeotti, the acting Assistant Attorney General, was interviewed by CPAC's Nancy Ross. He began by reading a note from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had been scheduled to be there representing the Justice Department.
I do have a note from the Attorney General, from Attorney General Pam Bondi, that I wanted to share, which is the following. I'm sorry to miss all of my CPAC friends today, especially Matt and Mercy Schlapp, Senator Blackburn, and the wonderful team at the Tim Tebow Foundation. Unfortunately, I am recovering from a recently torn cornea, which is preventing me from being with you. I truly wish I was able to join you and support all of the work being done on this critical issue. Human trafficking is one of the greatest challenges we face as a law enforcement community. It is also a top priority for the Department of Justice. It's a practice that allows evil criminal enterprises to profit off of vulnerable people and puts people in danger every day. The DOJ is working day in and day out to dismantle the foreign terrorist organizations that operate human trafficking networks in our country and to put human traffickers in prison. I am proud to send Matt Galeotti, that's her words, not mine. I'm proud to send Matt Galeotti in place today. He is helping lead the charge of the all-important fight, and I'm excited for you to hear from him. I look forward to the next time I can be with you. Sincerely, Pam. And we appreciate the applause for her and not boos for me. So I will do my best to fill those big shoes. But I can say one of the things that the Attorney General and I have in common is a law enforcement prosecutorial background where we focused on human trafficking and human smuggling issues, and this issue is near and dear to both of us, and it's a top priority of my criminal division.
Thank you, Matt. And we are praying for Attorney General Bondi, for her healing. We know she has all the confidence of our president He has said that repeatedly in this fight. It has been a top priority, of course, of his administration, the first administration, which took down NXIVM, the NXIVM cult, Backpage, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and on. And there have been many other prosecutions, and that's what we want to focus on, is things that don't make the news, things you may not be hearing about, but we know the president, again, has said repeatedly that saving God's children, I mean, that this evil must be eradicated. And it's no small task, but this is something, as a prosecutor yourself in New York, you were very actively involved in.
Nancy Ross of CPAC, sitting beside the Acting Assistant Attorney General Matthew Gagliardi. Other speakers at the CPAC Human Trafficking Summit in Washington were the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, and Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican of Arizona. And they also highlighted the money to fight human trafficking contained in the recently signed into law budget reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill. You can find C-SPAN's coverage archived at our video library at cspan.org. Associated Press, writing that more than 100 charity and human rights groups said Wednesday that Israel's blockade and ongoing military offensive are pushing Palestinians in the Gaza Strip toward starvation, as Israeli strikes killed another 21 people overnight, according to local health officials. Trump administration's Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff was meanwhile set to meet with a senior Israeli official about ceasefire talks, a sign that lower-level negotiations that have dragged on for weeks could be approaching a breakthrough. More than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since May while trying to get food in the Gaza Strip, mostly near aid sites run by an American contractor, the UN Human Rights Office said Tuesday. That was from AP. The United Nations Human Rights Council held its quarterly open debate on the situation in the Middle East today. A UN press release adds this, with a focus on the worsening crisis in Gaza. Riyad Mansour is the Palestinian ambassador to the UN.
4-year-old Razan fought for as long as she could, but her body gave up and she died of malnutrition on Sunday. Yesterday, 6-year-old Yusuf died of starvation. He was among 15 people to starve to death in the last 24 hours in Gaza. Israel has ravaged Gaza. It has destroyed nearly everything in that narrow strip of Palestinian land. But nearly 2 million human beings remain, including 1 million children. They must be saved. Israel has destroyed everything, their lives, their homes, the mosques and the churches, the schools and the hospitals, the entire infrastructure of life, and even the cemeteries. But make no mistake, the real target is the 2 million Palestinians who remain in Gaza. For Israel, their destruction is required for its scheme to take over the land. The fact Netanyahu and his government are actively pursuing transforming Gaza into a land without a people through genocide and ethnic cleansing under the unconvincing disguise of voluntary migration has only been made possible by the impunity they enjoy. All of what is happening now was predictable, premeditated and planned. It is a criminal and cruel enterprise occurring openly for all to see.
The Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, at today's UN Security Council meeting in New York City. The Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, also spoke. He said the UN's Organization for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, is biased against Israel, and that its employees will now be required to undergo security vetting.
OCHA has built its reports almost exclusively on data from Hamas-run institutions. There is no independent verification, no cross-checking, no effort to distinguish between civilians and terrorists. Every casualty is listed as a civilian. This violates the UN's own standards in every other conflict. But when it comes to Israel, those standards disappear. At the same time, OCHA has actively undermined Israel's humanitarian efforts in Gaza. It tracks only UN-coordinated aid while ignoring the thousands of trucks of food, medical supplies, and fuel that Israel, the private sector, and other partners have delivered. OCHA has undercounted over 13,000 trucks. That's a deliberate choice to misrepresent reality. Perhaps most disturbing, Israel has uncovered clear evidence of Hamas affiliation within OCHA's ranks. So when you combine all of that with Mr. Fletcher's repeated falsehoods, you are not looking at a humanitarian agency, you are looking at a propaganda machine. I have said many times before, Israel believes in humanitarian work. We are committed to helping civilians, to protecting innocents, and to ensuring aid reaches those who need it. But we will not work with organizations that have chosen politics over principles. Mr. Fletcher has made it clear that OCHA is no longer a neutral agency. Israel is therefore left with no choice but to act. Today, I announce that Israel will take steps to ensure that what has been happening with OCHA will no longer continue. Hundreds of OCHA employees are undergoing security vetting. Key employees will not have their permits renewed following clear evidence of strong affiliation with Hamas. Some were even involved in the atrocities of October 7.
Israeli Ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, speaking at today's UN Security Council meeting in New York City. The quarterly open debate on the situation in the Middle East, a focus today on Gaza. Times of Israel writes the Knesset approved a non-binding motion in favor of annexing the West Bank on Wednesday, a symbolic gesture that united the otherwise fractious right-wing governing coalition. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.